Hello, so welcome to part 22 of toxin sequestration theory. This is my new theory of cancer, and I'm very excited about it because it gives a very different view from the mainstream. We're arguing that cancer tumors are in fact the body's defense mechanism against toxic overload. The body intentionally creates tumors on purpose to sequester and store toxins. And the same is true for other situations where the body creates extra tissue. I've already talked about how in the case of fat tissue and obesity, the body uses fat tissue to store toxins as well. And the same is true for the skin growths, the moles, the cherry angiomas, the lipomas, the pimples. It's also using those to sequester toxins as well. And so today we have an exciting new topic, which is oxalates. And this topic is near and dear to me. You can see I have Sally Norton's book behind me on oxalates. And my YouTube handle is Oxalate Warrior. So I really got started on this whole journey of toxicity because of oxalates, because I went on the carnivore diet and I had oxalate dumping, which means that my body was trying to clear oxalates out of my organs and dumping it into the body fluids. So definitely oxalate is near and dear to me, and I try to raise awareness about oxalate because I deeply believe that there is a conspiracy to suppress that word. I just want to point out that I've been through the top universities in the world. I've done a PhD at Berkeley, a master's degree at University of Cambridge, and not a single time in my education did I ever hear the word oxalate or plant toxin once. And that includes a master's degree in biochemistry. So I just want to say that our education system has been stripped of the word oxalate and plant toxins more broadly. And so there appears to be a conspiracy to suppress information about oxalates. And I also want to highlight that oxalate has been directly linked to autism in children. There's been studies where they've actually measured the urine of, this is Susan Owen's work, by the way. She led a team of researchers where they measured the amount of oxalate in the urine and other body fluids of children who had autism versus children who did not have autism, and they found dramatically higher concentrations of oxalate in the urine of kids with autism. So it was at least 3 times, sometimes more. And it was true for every single kid with autism. So every single child that they tested with autism had higher levels of oxalate in the urine compared to kids that don't have autism. And so that suggests a link there. But of course, we haven't gotten enough research on this topic. So the government has not funded oxalate research very well. And so we need more research connecting that looks into the connection between oxalates and chronic disease. And it's not just autism. There's also studies out there connecting it to heart disease. For example, they found calcium oxalate crystals inside of plaques that are in people's arteries. So the atherosclerosis, the plaques have oxalates in them. And so, and of course, there's other conditions that oxalates have been linked to, like vulvodynia, chronic fatigue, and of course, kidney stones. Now, what's exciting about my video today is that I am going to give a completely different take on kidney stones relative to maybe what you've heard before. And I'm super excited about this. This is going to be the big, exciting punchline of the video today. But before we get into that, let's just back up a second and say that what is oxalate? Well, as you know, it's a plant toxin. So it's, from Sally's book right there. It is found in veggies, nuts, seeds, and some fruits. It's especially high in spinach, beet greens, Swiss chard. It's also high in sweet potatoes. It's high in chocolate. Some berries like blackberries and raspberries have it. It's also high in various seeds. So chia seeds, for example, have a lot of oxalates. And in general, it's in plant-based eating, right? So if you go on a carnivore diet, you're basically going on a zero oxalate diet, because you're cutting out these defense chemicals. And plants use them to defend their bodies. After all, the plants cannot move around. They are stuck to the ground. And so their only defense against animals eating them is chemical warfare. And so they've evolved these defense chemicals in order to protect their bodies from animals trying to eat them. And you can imagine that sometimes they surround the seeds, which are their babies, with oxalate crystals, so that whenever someone tries to bite into their seeds, they get these sharp little crystals in their mouth. So it's meant to deter not just herbivores, but also insects. So insects also might not enjoy getting these sharp crystals into their teeth. Well, not teeth, but jaws, whatever you want to call them. But anyway, so it's meant to deter both insects as well as herbivore animals from eating these plants. And then of course they've been touted as superfoods in our diet, and this links to the obvious conspiracy, which is why the heck are the highest oxalate foods promoted as superfoods? And I have coined the term the oxalate conspiracy to question why the media has precisely promoted the most toxic foods as superfoods. And but people have documented, of course, in practice that whenever they eat a lot of spinach and almonds and beet greens and chocolate, that they end up getting things like joint pain and skin rashes and kidney stones, amongst other things. So, all right. So then, that's what oxalates are. But they're not just an annoying thing. They're also a toxin. So remember that my definition of a toxin is something that creates oxidative stress via reactive oxygen species. So in my theory of disease, as well as Thomas Levy's theory, the cause of disease is oxidative damage due to reactive oxygen species. And sure enough, oxalates do create ROS. And they do that by, so they impair mitochondrial function, leading to electron leakage in the electron transport chain, and that produces directly some reactive oxygen species. Sorry for getting a little technical there, but they also overactivate certain enzymes like NADPH oxidase that produces ROS. So they have actually more than one way that they produce ROS. Even the crystals themselves can cause mechanical irritation that further drives ROS production. So they have at least 3 different ways by which they can create ROS. Now, what is the body's first line of defense against oxalates? Well, the first line of defense is to, number 1, excrete them through the kidneys. So in other words, just try to pee them out if you can. Number 2, you can potentially have gut bacteria. There's a particular gut bacteria called Oxalobacter formigenes that is really good at breaking down oxalates, and some other bacteria can also break them down to a lesser extent. So this points to the fact that antibiotics can be detrimental to your ability to break down oxalates, because some of those gut bacteria are serving a very important role in breaking down oxalates in the gut. So just be aware that overusage of antibiotics can mess up your ability of oxalates to your body's ability to get rid of oxalates. There's another path, basically binding them with dietary minerals. So especially calcium and magnesium in the gut, right? So if you eat the minerals alongside the oxalates, then it can help to bind them. Or even if you don't eat oxalates, but you just take a lot of certain minerals, it can help to pull the oxalates into the gut as well. So those are kind of the primary defenses that our bodies can use to deal with oxalates. That's what I would call sort of tier 1, right? Now, the things get even more interesting when we go to tier 2, and that's where we get into kidney stones. Now, to understand kidney stones, we have to appreciate that there are 2 different forms that oxalate exists in. One is the dissolved form or soluble form, which means that it's in a liquid, and the other is a crystallized form, which means it's in a solid crystal. And so ask yourself, which one do you think is more dangerous? Now, naively, you might think that the crystal form is more dangerous, but it turns out that it's actually the soluble dissolved form that is the real dangerous threat. At least that's what I've found in my investigations, because as I mentioned, oxalate is a toxin when it's in this dissolved form, and it has been connected to autism. And if you have it in a crystal form, then it can't really cross the blood-brain barrier, right? But if it's in a soluble form, then it's actually small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, particularly when this barrier might be already weakened by glucose and fructose and other toxins. And then when it gets across the blood-brain barrier, then it can cause brain problems and contribute to autism and other issues there. So it suggests that there is a defense strategy in crystallizing the oxalate, making it too big to cross the blood-brain barrier, and also just generally keeping it out of the liquid form, to keep it in this sort of prison cell. And so that highlights the fact that when soluble oxalate levels become dangerously high, the body actually responds with a protective mechanism by converting it into the insoluble calcium oxalate crystals. So the body says, hey, calcium, I need you to help me out. It sends the calcium to the oxalate and asks the calcium basically to form crystals with it. And that pulls the oxalate out of the liquid form and just sequesters it in a vault. We can once again, just like how we've thought about the skin growths as mini vaults, and we've thought about asbestos bodies as mini vaults, we can also think of kidney stones and calcium oxalate crystals as mini vaults that store oxalates and prevent the oxalates from roaming freely. That is what the body doesn't like. The body doesn't like toxins to go anywhere, right? They'd rather say, okay, well, at least I know the toxins are in that stone over there. It doesn't want the toxins to roam free, because if they roam free, they damage your brain, they damage your heart, they damage your arteries, they damage your vital organs. And so, yeah, basically what I am arguing is that kidney stones, believe it or not, are in fact a protective defense mechanism that the body uses to sequester and store oxalates. And that's why I'm giving such a, I wanted to flag that I'm giving an unconventional view here, because most people think of kidney stones as very scary. And of course they are painful. I don't want to downplay the painfulness of kidney stones. But, you could maybe make the case that a kidney stone is better than brain damage, right? It's better than brain damage. It's better than damage to your heart. It's better than damage to your arteries, right? So you can see that the latter are more serious. And this view of kidney stones being protective is supported by primary hyperoxaluria. So this is a, genetic condition where patients produce excessive oxalate, and they also develop recurring stones. So these are people who just naturally, by birth, produce a lot of oxalate. And now the problem is that if they have a systemic oxalate toxicity, then they could get every disease, right? They can get autism, they can get heart disease, and other major problems. And they also, but in these people, they typically get a lot of stones. And so the idea is that as long as the kidneys can still concentrate and bind oxalates into those stones, then the systemic oxalosis is actually delayed. In other words, they don't die. But, however, once kidney function declines, meaning that the kidneys can't really sort of, concentrate the oxalate and form these stones, etc., then the plasma oxalate levels rise in the blood, and leading to widespread oxalate deposition in the bones, the heart, the blood vessels, the skin, and other tissues, which is a more dangerous condition called systemic oxalosis. And so this suggests that the kidney stones are kind of preventing that later stage condition, systemic oxalosis. Okay, so, and I just want to make, once again, the analogy that kidney stones are looking very similar to the skin growths. The moles store toxic metals, the lipomas store the lipophilic toxins like seed oils and damaged PUFAs, while the kidney stones are storing specifically the oxalates. And it might seem like those are different, but in an abstract sense, they're actually very similar. They're both meant to store and sequester toxins to protect the vital organs. And it's not just kidney stones. Of course, the oxalates get stored in dental tartar, as well as in the bones and in the joints. And just on a personal note, I will point out that after I went carnivore and I had oxalate dumping, interestingly, a lot of kind of like internal pains went away. So like I had lower back pain and that went away. I had tendonitis in my knee and that went away. But then I started to get arthritis in my fingers, in my joints and my fingers. So it makes sense from a protective standpoint that my body was saying like, well, let me get the oxalates out of the more central parts of the body and then send them off to the periphery. Send them off to the peripheral tissues, my fingers, which are a safe storage place. And then the body just decided, well, I'm just going to use his fingers to store his oxalate crystals for safekeeping so that the oxalates can't roam freely, etc. So it can, and also that also raises interesting points about dental tartar. How many dentists do you know that actually have heard the word oxalate before? I have to constantly educate dentists about oxalates. They've never heard of it. It's very frustrating. But nevertheless, calcium oxalate crystals are a key component of dental tartar. Basically, dental tartar is composed of two types of things. It's calcium phosphate and calcium oxalate. So it's two different types of crystals. And we can once again view dental tartar as a sequestration strategy for oxalate. Now, what does mainstream medicine do? Well, of course, they're always attacking our defense mechanisms. So we've seen it again and again and again. They take our defense mechanism and then they demonize it. So for example, they say cancer tumors are a disease and we have to develop protocols like chemotherapy and radiation to attack it. And so then you end up in a very dangerous situation where the mainstream is attacking your cancer tumor with chemo and radiation. Same thing is true with obesity. They demonize obesity, which is a defense mechanism, and then they attack it with the GLP-1 drugs. Same thing is true with pimples. Pimples are a defense mechanism. They store toxins, and then they attack the pimples with antibiotics, benzoyl peroxide, and retinoids that kill bacteria and dry out the skin. And now we have sort of new defense mechanisms that I just brought up. So kidney stones. Now think about the fact that oxalate has been linked to autism, and they never say that, right? You will never hear that in the mainstream, but they will say, you might hear oxalate in the context of kidney stones, right? But that's the one defense mechanism. That's the one case where the body is doing something good with the oxalates. It's actually storing it. So, but they want to attack your kidney stones. They want to use shock waves to break them up into tiny pieces, or use high dose citrate to break it up into small pieces. Now, this does raise interesting points about should you attack kidney stones or not. And I'm not going to give medical advice, but I just want to add a word of caution that, well, in my theory, soluble oxalate, dissolved oxalate, is a toxin, and so you might not be doing yourself favors by always attacking your kidney stones. And with that said, kidney stones are non-trivial, and they can be very painful. They can cause blockages, and so it can obviously make sense in extreme cases of huge kidney stones to try to break them up. And I'm still investigating this, so I want to just let you know that this is still work in progress, and I want to dive further into, is it a good idea to really break up kidney stones? I will say, though, that if you are chronically doing this, so not just in an acute situation. I mean, I can understand in an acute situation, if you're in intense pain, then obviously you might want to break up your stone. But if you're always taking citrate every day, right, for years, then that looks in conflict with my theory, basically. That looks in conflict with my theory because it says you are fighting against your own body's defense mechanism and you're constantly retoxifying yourself. Your body had the oxalate stored up in the crystals nicely. That was its strategy. And then you retoxified the body by taking the citrate every day, always breaking up the stones. So that's something to think about, retoxification of the body by attacking your storage vault. Okay, so, and once again, there is a hierarchical strategy that the body uses with oxalate, just like all the other toxins that I've talked about. Basically, tier 1 is the primary defense, getting things out with the kidneys, using the gut to break down oxalate, etc. Tier 2 are the crystal mini vaults. That's the kidney stones, the dental tartar, arthritis in your fingers. And then finally, tier 3, whenever the mini vaults are not enough, are the full-blown cancer tumors. That's whenever your body is overloaded with oxalates as well as potentially other toxins as well. So once again, we have this tiered response, and there is key evidence showing that oxalate is linked to cancer. Namely, there is a 2015 study that tested the oxalate levels in normal breast tissue and in breast tumor tissue. And they found something like 10 times higher concentration of oxalate in the breast tumor tissue than in the normal breast tissue. So the oxalates are concentrating inside the breast tissue. And in fact, they found elevated oxalate levels in all breast tumor samples that they tested. So they tested a whole bunch of different breast tumor samples, and every single one showed elevated oxalate levels relative to normal tissue. So this is a repeated study. It's not just like they tested it once. No, they tested it many times. In every single case, they found elevated oxalate levels in breast tumors. So, just be aware that if you have breast tumors, or if you know someone who does, give them a heads up about oxalates, because oxalates are a key risk factor for breast tumors. And it also supports the TST view, my theory's view, because what the heck would cancer cells want with oxalates if cancer cells were selfish? If they truly were selfish, why would they be protecting the body from oxalates toxicity? And it's not just breast tumors, it's also kidney tumors. So they've done studies of kidney cancer. And as you can imagine, there's because oxalates are naturally concentrated in the kidneys, then the body would tend to form tumors in the kidneys themselves when dealing with oxalate overload. And sure enough, in kidney cancer, calcium oxalate crystals have been observed within the kidney tumors. Studies have documented oxalate deposition in kidney cancers, suggesting that tumors basically serve as a secondary storage site whenever kidney stones are not enough, basically. And they've also found oxalate microcalcifications and elevated oxalate levels in colorectal tumors. Okay, so those are 3 different types of cancers: breast cancer, kidney cancer, and colorectal cancer, and all 3 of them have been tested for oxalate levels and have found elevated oxalate levels in those 3 types of cancers. So that's very interesting. So oxalate is a carcinogen. It is stored in cancer tumors. Another one is thyroid cancer. It's also found in thyroid tumors. And so those are basically the toxin to organ mapping. Remember, my toxin to organ mapping for oxalates are: number 1, breast tumors; number 2, kidney tumors; number 3, colorectal; and number 4, thyroid. So those are the 4 organs that oxalates map onto in this mapping. And as I said, there's plenty of evidence supporting this view. They've done studies showing that oxalate is higher in the tumor tissue than in the normal tissue. There's also evidence that, just statistically, people who have kidney stones are at a higher risk for kidney, breast, and colorectal cancer. Isn't that interesting? So they've done basically statistical analyses, and the people who have a history of kidney stones tend to show an elevated risk of kidney cancer, breast cancer, and colorectal cancer. Those are precisely the cancers where oxalates are found in higher concentrations. So it all checks out, everything, the story fully matches up. So yeah, that's basically the idea around oxalates. And I want to just sum up that I gave a new take on kidney stones. I reinterpreted kidney stones as a defense mechanism against systemic oxalate toxicity. You can think of a kidney stone as a prison cell, a vault where the body captures the oxalate and prevents it from roaming freely. This helps to prevent it from crossing the blood-brain barrier and doing brain damage. It helps it from damaging the heart and the arteries. And I know this is a new view, but it fits in perfectly with my broader theory that the body does things on purpose. And furthermore, that the mainstream always demonizes our defense mechanisms. So anything that they're willing to talk about and demonize and treat are usually things that are the defenses, and kidney stones are no exception. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.